Before you hit that update button on your iPhone, you need to hear what's happening at Apple right now. January 2026. Tim Cook is watching his company face the biggest user revolt in Apple's history. We're not talking about a few angry tweets or some complaints on Reddit. We're talking about 85% of iPhone users refusing to update their phones. Class action lawsuits were settled just weeks ago. Apple's own VP of design is fleeing the company in disgrace, and in the most humiliating move possible, Apple just announced they're handing the keys to Siri over to Google because they literally cannot build AI that works. This is the story of how the most valuable tech company on earth completely fumbled the AI revolution, and how iPhone users are finally saying enough is enough. Because what's happening right now isn't just about software updates or fancy features, it's about trust. And Apple is losing it fast. And before we dive in, I want to know, are you one of the 85% still refusing to update to iOS 26? Or did you take the plunge? Drop a comment and let me know your experience, because I guarantee you're not alone in whatever camp you're in. Let's start with the numbers, because they tell a story that should terrify everyone at Apple headquarters. As of January 2026, only 15 to 18% of iPhone users worldwide have updated to iOS 26. Think about that for a second. Apple released this update back in September. We're 4 months in, and 85% of users looked at it and said, no thanks. How bad is that? StatCounter tracks this data every year. In January 2025, at the exact same point after iOS 18 launched, over 77% of users had already updated. The year before that, iOS 17 hit 54%. iOS 16 was at 62%. iOS 26 is sitting at 15%. That's not just bad, that's catastrophic. That's the kind of number that makes executives sweat, and investors start asking very uncomfortable questions. And here's the thing, this isn't because people don't know about the update. Apple makes updating ridiculously easy. It's literally a few taps in your settings. No, people know about iOS 26. They're just choosing not to install it. Why? 2 words that have become Apple's nightmare. Liquid glass. If you haven't seen it yet, Liquid Glass is Apple's new design language for iOS 26. They rolled it out across iPhone, iPad, Mac, and even Vision Pro. Everything got the same translucent fluid interface treatment. Apple thought they were creating the future. Users thought they were creating a disaster. The complaints came fast and brutal. The interface is hard to read, the buttons are too small, everything's transparent to the point where you can't figure out what you're looking at. On Safari, you have to squint to find the tiny bookmarks button, and good luck figuring out where it's hiding. On Mac, the menu bar became a chaotic mess of tiny options that serve no purpose except confusing your eyes. Social media exploded. It's been 3 weeks since I reluctantly updated my iPhone iOS, and I dislike the new Liquid Glass UI more every day, one user wrote on Threads. Another said, if you're ever having imposter syndrome, this update is proof that even professionals at billion-dollar companies make huge mistakes. And then the ultimate sign that something had gone horribly wrong. Alan Dye, Apple's vice president responsible for Liquid Glass, left the company, just left. In the middle of the controversy, the guy who designed this thing looked at the backlash and apparently decided he'd rather be literally anywhere else. But here's where it gets darker. Liquid glass isn't the only reason people are avoiding iOS 26. It's just the most visible symptom of a much bigger problem, Apple Intelligence, or as users have started calling it, Apple's AI disaster. Let me take you back to June 2024. WWDC, Apple's big developer conference. Tim Cook gets on stage and unveils Apple Intelligence with massive fanfare. Revolutionary AI features, a completely reimagined Siri that understands context, acts on your behalf, and integrates with your personal data. The future of the iPhone is here. The marketing campaign was everywhere. TV commercials, billboards, celebrity endorsements. Apple saturated the internet, promising that iPhone 16 would be the AI phone that changes everything. The advertisements cultivated a clear expectation: buy the iPhone 16, get groundbreaking AI features immediately. People believed them. iPhone 16 sales were strong. Apple's stock hit new highs. Investors were excited. Customers were excited. Everyone was ready for the AI revolution, and then nothing happened. October 2024 came. Apple released a few basic Apple Intelligence features, notification summaries, some writing, tools, image generation, basically the bare minimum to say they technically delivered something. But the big feature, the one everyone actually cared about, the revolutionary new Siri, delayed. Apple said it would come in early 2025. Don't worry, they said. It's coming soon. March 2025 arrived, and Apple had to make one of the most humiliating admissions in the company's history. The new Siri wasn't ready. It wasn't even close to ready. They pushed it back again sometime in 2026, they said. Maybe, let that sink in. Apple announced this feature in June 2024, sold millions of iPhone 16s based on marketing that showed this feature working, and as of January 2026, 18 months later, it still doesn't exist. The lawsuit started immediately. On March 19, 2025, a federal class action lawsuit was filed in California. The complaint was brutal. It accused Apple of false advertising and unfair competition. The core argument was simple. Apple marketed the iPhone 16 around groundbreaking Apple Intelligence features, especially the AI-powered Siri. They knew these features didn't exist. They knew they wouldn't exist for years. They sold phones anyway. The lawsuit claimed Apple intentionally used misleading advertising to inflate demand, convincing customers to buy unnecessary upgrades based on promises it couldn't fulfill. One law firm called it AI washing, overhyping advanced technologies to compete in the AI market while delivering empty promises. And you know what? Apple settled. On December 18, 2025, just a few weeks ago, the parties filed a joint notice of settlement. Apple agreed to resolve the matter on a class-wide basis. They're still working out the final details, but the message is clear. Apple knew they messed up badly enough that fighting it in court wasn't worth it. But wait, there's more. While Apple was dealing with lawsuits over features that don't exist, the features that do exist were creating their own disasters. Remember those notification summaries I mentioned? The ones that actually shipped? They're so bad, they became international news. In December 2024, the BBC sent a complaint to Apple. Why? Because Apple Intelligence's notification summary feature falsely stated that the BBC News app reported Luigi Mangione, the guy arrested for shooting the United Healthcare CEO, had killed himself. He hadn't. The AI just made it up. The BBC thought maybe it was a one-time glitch. Nope. In January 2025, they sent another complaint highlighting more false summaries. Apple Intelligence announced that Luke Littler had won the PDC World Darts Championship hours before the final had even taken place. It also reported that Brazilian tennis player Rafael Nadal, who is actually Spanish, had come out as gay. That story was about a completely different Brazilian player. Apple's response? Features are still in beta. They're being continuously improved. Users should send feedback for unexpected summaries. Translation: we released AI that makes up news stories, and we're hoping you'll help us fix it by reporting when it lies to you. The backlash got so intense that Apple had to disable notification summaries for all news applications in the iOS 18.3 beta. They added a disclaimer warning that summaries may contain errors. By iOS 26, they brought it back, but with a label that says, "Summarized by Apple Intelligence," as if labeling the fake news makes it better. This is what Apple Intelligence actually delivered, not the revolutionary AI assistant they promised, not the contextual, personalized Siri that understands your life, fake news summaries, and writing tools you could get from free apps. Meanwhile, the competition is eating Apple's lunch. Google's Pixel phones have Gemini Live with video and screen sharing, real-time translation, call screen that answers unknown numbers for you and provides transcripts, Magic Eraser, Best Take, Audio Magic Eraser, AI features that actually work and solve real problems. Samsung's Galaxy phones have Galaxy AI with circle to search, live translation, note assist, and transcript assist. AI is woven into the entire operating system, not sprinkled on top as an afterthought. And here's the kicker. Both Google and Samsung promise 7 years of updates for their flagship phones, the same commitment Apple used to brag about as its exclusive advantage. The comparisons are brutal. Android users get AI that feels like ChatGPT in their pocket, integrated into everything they do. iPhone users get notification summaries that make up news stories, and a Siri that still can't set a timer without screwing it up. Siri! Let's talk about Siri for a minute, because this might be the saddest part of the whole story. Siri launched with the iPhone 4S in 2011. It was revolutionary. The first mainstream voice assistant. Siri educated millions of people about talking to their phones. It was genuinely impressive for its time. 14 years later, Siri is what most people view as Apple's largest continuous failure. The assistant that once led the pack now trails behind Google Assistant and even Samsung's Bixby. When you ask Siri a basic factual question, something Google Assistant would answer directly, Siri responds with, "Here's what I found on the web," and shows you a list of links. The entire point of a voice assistant is not have to look at links. Users describe it as one of the most sensational U-turns in technology history, and Apple keeps promising to fix it. They announced a complete overhaul using large language models. Internal reports called it Siri 2.0. Except here we are in January 2026, and that overhaul still doesn't exist. Apple now says the personalized Siri features might come in iOS 26.4, sometime in March or April 2026. Maybe, if development over the next few weeks proves promising. That's an actual quote from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. If, maybe, proves promising. This is not the language of a company confident in its AI strategy. This is the language of a company scrambling to deliver something, anything, before they lose all credibility. And speaking of losing credibility, let's talk about what happened just days ago. On January 13th, 2026, Apple and Google announced a partnership that sent shockwaves through the tech industry. Apple is handing over its AI strategy to Google. The next generation of Apple Foundation models will be based on Google's Gemini models and cloud technology. Translation: Apple spent years trying to build AI that works, failed completely, and is now paying Google to do it for them. Analyst Dan Ives at Wedbush called it a major validation moment for Google. And he's right. Google, the company Apple has positioned itself against for years, just got Apple's CEO to publicly admit they can't build competitive AI on their own. The irony is almost too perfect. Google even mocked iPhone's AI shortcomings in ads promoting the Pixel phone last summer. They made fun of Apple's failures in their marketing, and now Apple is paying them to fix those failures. This is the company that built its entire brand on vertical integration, on controlling every aspect of the hardware and software experience, on not relying on partners for core features, and they just outsourced the future of iPhone to their biggest competitor. Analyst Ming-Chi Kuo explained what's really happening. Apple is facing massive short-term pressure. They need a credible AI showing at WWDC this year after announcing Apple Intelligence and failing to deliver. They need something to show investors. The Google partnership buys them time while they scramble to build their own AI server chips, which aren't expected to be ready until the second half of 2026. This is a temporary fix, a band-aid. Apple is admitting they're so far behind that they need Google to bail them out while they catch up, if they catch up. And the people who should be most worried, iPhone users who bought into the AI hype. Because here's what's actually happening on the ground. iPhone users are switching to Android at rates we haven't seen in years. A January 2025 survey by Consumer Intelligence Research Partners found that 18% of new Android buyers in the US were previous iPhone owners. That's up from 11% in 2022. That's a 64% increase in just 3 years. Samsung's Galaxy S25 saw a 19% year-over-year increase in sales among former iPhone users. Google's Pixel 8a and Pixel 9 Pro reported record adoption rates from iOS switchers. Why are they leaving? Better AI is the #1 reason cited. Superior assistance, real-time translation, and generative photo editing that actually works. Hardware innovation is second. Foldables, diverse form factors, and stylus support. Stuff Apple doesn't offer. Customization is third. The ability to actually control your phone instead of being locked into Apple's vision of how you should use it. Users are tired of feeling trapped in what they call Apple prison. They're tired of paying premium prices for phones that promise AI features that don't exist. They're tired of Siri being useless while Android assistants actually help. And switching is getting easier. Google and Apple just announced they're working together to make moving between platforms smoother. Google's switch to Android app now transfers messages, photos, contacts, calendars, and even passwords over local Wi-Fi. The barriers that used to keep people locked in are coming down. The biggest remaining barrier? iMessage, the green bubble stigma. But even that's fading as RCS support rolls out, and younger users start caring less about bubble colors and more about whether their phone actually works. So where does this leave Tim Cook? He's reportedly handing over the CEO role sometime in 2026 to John Ternus, Apple's Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering. Cook's legacy, the thing he'll be remembered for, is looking increasingly shaky. He kept Apple profitable. He expanded into services. He navigated trade wars and tariffs, but he completely fumbled AI, the biggest technology shift since the smartphone itself. And fumbled might be too gentle a word. Apple's AI strategy has been a masterclass in how not to manage expectations. They overpromised features that weren't ready. They marketed products based on capabilities that didn't exist. They delayed and delayed and delayed while the competition lapped them. Analysts are calling 2026 a make-or-break year for Apple. Daniel Newman at Futurum Group said, Apple has the user base and distribution that allows it to be more patient in chasing new trends, like AI, but this is a critical year. Another analyst said, you can't have a fourth industrial revolution and watch the AI party through the windows on the outside. That's exactly what Apple has been doing, watching through the windows while Google, Samsung, OpenAI, and others build the future, promising they'll catch up soon, asking users to just wait a little longer, but users are done waiting. 85% of them won't even update to iOS 26. They're sticking with iOS 18, bugs and security vulnerabilities and all, because the alternative is worse. When your latest operating system has a 15% adoption rate 4 months after launch, you've lost the plot. The liquid glass controversy perfectly captures Apple's current problem. They made a bold design choice that users hate. Instead of listening to feedback and adjusting, they doubled down. Alan Dye left the company. Users revolted. And Apple is now facing the largest cohort of users remaining on older software in years. Those users aren't getting security updates. iOS 18 support is expected to end sometime between January and March 2026. That means millions of iPhones will become progressively less secure as the year goes on, all because Apple released an update so bad that people would rather risk security vulnerabilities than install it. This is unprecedented. Apple has always been able to count on users updating quickly. High adoption rates meant developers could use new features without worrying about fragmentation. It meant security patches reached everyone fast. It meant the Apple ecosystem stayed unified and consistent. That's gone now. The ecosystem is fragmenting. Developers can't rely on iOS 26 adoption. Security is becoming a patchwork. The consistent Apple experience that users paid premium prices for is falling apart. Think about what this means for developers. When you're building an iOS app, you normally assume most users are on the latest version. Within a few months, that lets you use new APIs, new frameworks, new capabilities without worrying about fragmentation. It's one of the main advantages iOS has always had over Android, where developers have to support dozens of Android versions across hundreds of device types. But now, iOS developers are looking at an 85% user base that refuses to update. If you want to use iOS 26 features, you're building for 15% of users. That's not viable. So developers are stuck supporting iOS 18, which means they can't use any of the new capabilities Apple spent months building. The development tools Apple created for iOS 26 are sitting unused because nobody can justify building for such a tiny user base. And security? This is where it gets genuinely dangerous. Apple is expected to stop releasing security patches for iOS 18 between January and March of 2026. That means millions of iPhones will be running software with known vulnerabilities that won't get fixed. Hackers know this. They can target iOS 18 users specifically, knowing there won't be patches coming. Apple has created a situation where users have to choose between security and usability. Update to iOS 26 and get security patches, but deal with liquid glass and broken AI. Or stay on iOS 18 and keep a working phone, but accept growing security risks. That's not a choice users should have to make, but Apple has forced it on them anyway. And the worst part? There's no clear path forward. Apple can't abandon liquid glass without admitting defeat and embarrassing themselves further. But they can't force users to adopt it either. The features that were supposed to make iOS 26 compelling, the AI stuff, don't work. The features that do work are causing international incidents with fake news. Meanwhile, the competition keeps shipping actual AI features that actually work. Google is steadily releasing more Gemini-powered tools. Samsung is iterating on Galaxy AI. Even Microsoft is making progress with Copilot. Apple is the only major tech company that can't seem to get AI right. Some analysts argue Apple's restrained approach might pay off if the AI bubble bursts. That while everyone else is spending hundreds of billions on data centers and chips, Apple is sitting on over $130 billion in cash that they could use for strategic acquisitions. Maybe they buy their way into competence. But that's a bet, not a strategy. And it requires the AI bubble to actually burst, which is far from certain. It also requires Apple to successfully integrate an acquisition in a way it has struggled with historically. Their biggest purchase ever was Beats Music for $3 billion in 2014. They're not practiced at big transformative acquisitions. What's more likely is Apple continues muddling through 2026, releasing incremental improvements to Apple Intelligence, hoping users eventually accept liquid glass, praying the Google partnership delivers something they can show at WWDC, and desperately trying to get Siri working before they completely lose the iPhone user base. Because that's what's at stake here, not just one bad software update or one delayed feature. The entire iPhone franchise was when 18% of new Android buyers are former iPhone users, and that number is trending up. You're watching the beginning of a platform migration. It's gradual, it's at the edges, but it's happening. The users leaving aren't the ones trapped deep in the ecosystem with Apple Watches, AirPods, and Macs. They're the ones who bought an iPhone because it was the best phone, and now they're realizing it's not anymore. They're the ones who were promised revolutionary AI and got fake news summaries. They're the ones who see Android phones doing amazing things with AI while Siri still can't handle basic requests. And once that migration starts, it's hard to stop because every person who switches tells their friends it's not as hard as they thought. Every former iPhone user in their social circle makes it a little more acceptable. Every green bubble in the group chat makes iMessage a little less important. This is how platforms die, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a slow erosion as users gradually decide the grass actually is greener on the other side, as the reasons to stay get weaker and the barriers to leaving get lower. Apple still has advantages. The build quality is excellent. The ecosystem integration for those deep in it is genuinely valuable. iOS is still beautifully designed, liquid glass notwithstanding. Privacy is better than most Android alternatives, though even that's being questioned more. But none of that matters if the core experience isn't good, if Siri is useless, if promised features don't exist, if updates make your phone worse instead of better, if you're paying premium prices for an increasingly mediocre experience. And that's where Apple is right now. Premium prices, mediocre AI, broken promises, fleeing executives, lawsuits, user revolt. partnership with competitors to fix problems they should have solved themselves. Tim Cook promised a transformation through AI. What he delivered was chaos. The most valuable tech company on earth reduced to begging Google for help while 85% of users refused to install their latest software. That January 2026 adoption rate tells you everything you need to know. When given the choice between Apple's vision of the future and what they already have, users overwhelmingly chose to stick with what they have. That's not users being resistant to change. That's users saying your future looks worse than our present. The question now is whether Apple can fix this before it's too late. Can they get Siri working? Can they make liquid glass less terrible? Can they deliver AI features that don't generate fake news? Can they stop the user migration to Android? Before it becomes a flood, 2026 will answer those questions. And based on everything we've seen so far, the answers don't look good. So here's my question for you. If you're an iPhone user, are you sticking with Apple through this mess? Are you one of the 85% refusing to update? Or have you already made the switch to Android? And if you're thinking about switching, what's holding you back? Let me know in the comments because this conversation is just getting started. We're watching a major shift in the smartphone industry happen in real time, and your experience is part of that story. And if you found this video valuable, if you want more coverage of what's actually happening in tech without the corporate PR spin, hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to tell you the truth about the technology reshaping your life, because you deserve to know what's really going on behind the marketing and the hype. The future of the iPhone is being decided right now, and for the first time in years, it's users making that decision, not Apple. That's worth paying attention to.